right? So day 2 of our focus on process in generating content. And I wanted to talk through how I've built my own process. So I'm doing this with myself. I'm also doing this with my team right now. And they're a little bit like kind of like bigger principles. They're not super specific of what we're actually doing, but it's how we came up with the steps of what we do. And I think it applies in both scenarios very well. So there are, let's see, how many steps had I created 5 steps. Okay. So step number 1, let's just go right into it. You need to start with something that you know you can execute. So one of the biggest hurdles I think with process and goals and a lot of that kind of stuff is that we overestimate our capabilities when it comes to doing it. Like we think we can handle too much, or that we're supposed to do more than we're just supposed to be able to do a lot, right? And so what we do is we set these ambitious goals because, we're like, we want to be great and awesome and whatever. And it's kind of too much. And when it comes to process momentum, I feel like, especially with generating content, like momentum is a huge thing. Getting into a groove, being able to turn out stuff like what I do with the videos right now, just as an example, I do them all at once. Because when I'm in like video mode and I'm talking, I feel like I'm able to not say as much, which I've been working on. I have like a good flow. And so that momentum's really big. And when you like just start out and you have this big process task that you're trying to tackle that you don't have a history of doing very well or at all, it's going to be hard to get through that and like build the momentum. It's just too big. I think it's much better to start slow and like smaller than you're even comfortable with, intentionally, just to make sure that you get it done. So you start small. So here's how you start small. So you look at, let's say you take your week. Let's say you're doing some personal branding exercise, right? You're wanting to grow your audience, whatever. Share ideas. You figure out how much time you feel like you're willing to dedicate. So I would start with the time commitment first. And let's say you're willing to put in 30 minutes in the morning, every morning before you start work. Great. Okay, so you've got 30 minutes. What I would do then is I would figure out, what do you absolutely know you can do within that time frame? So if I'm just starting out and I'm not sure how long it takes for me to write a post, maybe I'll be like, okay, in 30 minutes, I feel like I can write 1 post and comment on 3 people's other posts. So maybe a post takes me 15 minutes to write and, 15 minutes for the comments or whatever. Obviously, that sounds like it's not going to take 30 minutes, right? And it probably won't. But I know I'm going to be able to accomplish it. And so I think you should, when you're starting with something you know you can execute, I think you should be left with time left over in your time allotment. So step number 2 would then be to test it, to start. So you make sure that what you estimated you'd be able to do, that you can actually do it. If you planned it well, like I said, you should have time left over. If you overestimated your abilities, and no big deal, whatever, it's fine. You get to adjust. You get to tone it down a little bit. Just take some stuff off. It's not that big of a deal. So I guess that goes straight into like my third point, is like after you've started, you need to adjust. Leading up to the adjustment step, though, what I would say is like you should probably have, as you're doing this, your goal is to get to, I would say, like a month of being able to execute before you really adjust things. So you should be able to adjust stuff down. So like say you start out and it was too much, adjust down immediately to something that you know you're able to do. Once you get into a groove of something you know you're able to accomplish, I would not add stuff back in until you've done it for a month. And then once the month's in, you can go to like what my fourth step would be, as far as instead of adjustments, it'd be optimizing. So the great thing with like a process is now that you've got a month under your belt, you'd be able to find ways that can be improved. So you could either, within that time allotment, if you know you've got now, you've got it down enough to where you write and do all that within 15 minutes. Now you've got 15 extra minutes that you can add something else in. You could spend more time, on distribution. You could, like, I think the coolest ways of optimizing the content process is you'd actually find ways of improving your quality without adding extra time in. I think that's a really cool one. And then the fifth step is to just stick with it. 1 month is the bare minimum as far as like getting yourself established. But 1 month isn't going to cut it. Like, you have to carry through. You just have to carry through for a long, long, long time in order for this to actually be something. I've been doing this for 1 year and 3 months now. I didn't adjust really my content building process until like 12 months in. More than a year. Because I was just making sure I could get it done, and it became like a habit and part of who I was. So you have to stick with it and carry it through. Are there any ideas in this list? So let me go back through the 5. So you start with something small that you know you can execute. 2, you start and test it. And 3, you adjust if you did too much. And so associated with that, you have to let that roll for at least a month of something you're able to execute. 4, you optimize, whether that means adding additional time or filling in gaps if you've got extra time, or finding ways that you can be more efficient, so cut down on how much time it takes to create content, or even improve the quality. Lots of ways you can optimize it. And then the 5th is to stick with it. So are there any of those ideas that you guys want me to expand on like my views? If so, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.